Hey, everybody, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We are the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. We are presented by Evergreen Podcast, although the announcement hasn't really been made yet, but we're going to say it anyway. Evergreen Podcast is a local podcast network, and we're looking forward to all that comes from that in 2021, and we are in 2021. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going well. I'm happy to have a new year because I'm pretty sure that means all the bad stuff is over, right? Isn't that how that works? That
Yeah.
we left all that in 2020, so we got a new year, and we're going to talk some music, and yeah.
Yeah, we kind of missed our best of 2020 music, but it doesn't really matter. People still have time. You know, this is one of the things that we talk a lot about because you and I don't like hard, fast rules. You know, we don't work
Yep.
for a publication. So, you know, if I discovered something from 2019 or 2020, from late 2019 and 2020, it counts on the 2020 list.
Yeah, and I think another thing too about like doing it in 2021 is we actually truly allowed ourselves that if anything caught our attention, New Year's Eve, we could have still made the list because that's still 2020. So
Which is really important
that's right.
as people are going to find out.
It sort of happened this year, and I mean not New Year's Eve, but yeah, I mean it definitely happened a little bit that we had a late album that hit both of us pretty hard.
So I'm gonna share the top 10, our top tens, and we could just kind of talk about it. We don't have to go one by one by one, but let's talk
Sure.
about the year in music. Certainly, let's save the number one. Let's talk about Pearl Jam first because
Yeah.
that was even though that one didn't make my top 10 this year, it was a really important album for both of us just because of the year that we had and the band that Pearl Jam is to us and kind of what we needed at what time we needed it.
Yeah. So I would say I expected most of the year. It really felt to me like, man, I think I'm gonna have to like figure out at the end of the year if I can really make Pearl Jam my number one album of the year because like they're like at this point in their career, like I mean, Gigaton is an awesome album. I love it, but like they're not reinventing any wheels anymore. They're not pushing any boundaries anymore. And there were albums that came out that did some pretty remarkable things. That it was like, man, like you know, there's a part of me that's like, that makes those a better album. But how do I separate what an album sort of means to me? And as with anything in life, like a lot of times things come down to luck and timing. And so for me, the reason I had Pearl Jam number two on my list was because of when that album came out. It came out March. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but it was sometime in March. But I may or may not have had an
Yeah,
opportunity
we
to
got that
listen
one
to
leaked
it
a couple days early.
a little bit ahead of time. And this all happened like right as the shutdowns were first happening. And I had just had the flu. I was really sick, and I thought maybe for a minute I had COVID. And then and that was, again in March, when you have the flu in March, like that's like the scariest freaking time to have it. Like I was freaking out about that. And then all the shutdowns started happening, and I was like, it hit me. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to see my family in the next, when's the next time I'm going to see my family or, anybody, so it was a heavy time for me for sure. And,
No, I was actually talking about that with somebody recently, just for as however long the pandemic has dragged on and how much of a pain in the butt it's been. Like, in my business, we occasionally get some cash. And so when the pandemic first happened, I was wearing plastic gloves to count cash. And I was
yeah,
very nervous about stuff like that. I was wearing a mask and gloves because cash had touched other people's hands and I didn't know if it was safe to handle stuff like that. And people were wiping down their Amazon packages and leaving their
yep,
groceries in their garage. And so for all the stuff, you have to like bring yourself back to that level of fear to realize how much of a binky Pearl Jam Gigaton was
Yes.
for me.
And that's exactly it. Like we just didn't know what was happening, and like there was so much unknown, and so all of a sudden, like the most comforting thing in the world, my favorite band of all time, puts out this album, and not just an album, like a damn good album. Like this is a really good album.
Like
Like
maybe their best album in 3 or 4 albums. Like
I would,
a callback with songs that belong on the all-time current set list
yeah,
when they are able
exactly.
to tour again.
Yeah. And so for me, like, I mean, it was exactly what I needed. I mean, it just calmed me down. I was able to escape for, an hour here and there as I listened to that album over and over and over again. And I remember at one point, I didn't know anywhere I could go. And so it was like the first like kind of warm day, like it wasn't like super warm yet, but it was kind of warm. And so like I just got in my car and just went for a drive and just listened to this album. I literally had nowhere to go. I just drove and listened to this album, and there was just something peaceful about it, and it meant so much to me. And so I've been unable to separate that from the rest of the year. And anytime I need to go back to that feeling of just, what, like everything's all right, it's cool, like I'll just put that Pearl Jam album on and I just go right back to that place. It's just become such a comforting album to me. And so that's why I have it ranked as high as I did. So I can recognize that there are certainly albums that are doing more interesting things that we're going to talk about, but the comfort level and what that album meant and when it came out was hard for me to separate from my list this year. I don't usually do it that way, but this year that was just a certain exception I just felt like I had to make, if I was being honest. I mean, when the Spotify year end of year review came out, like it was overwhelming. Like for me, it was like, hey, Andrew, you listen to way more Pearl Jam than anything else, that I listened to Gigaton more than any other album. So for me, it was that's why it got as high as it did on my list.
So, which leads us to Deftones as well, because I know we're not at the end of the pandemic, but you want to talk about bookends of bands that were you're in my wheelhouse when we were younger that give us that comforting feel. And I know Deftones aren't like a comforting band just musically, but in terms of familiarity and importance in my life, I discovered Deftones in high school. Around the Fur came out when I was in college. So did White Pony, and I've been following that band for years and years and years. And then so for them to bring out Ohms kind of in the middle, toward later in the pandemic, it felt like kind of a bookend of comfort between Pearl Jam and Deftones for me to have not only a Deftones album, but a really freaking good one.
And the thing that's awesome about Deftones too is like, whereas I said Pearl Jam's not really doing anything too different per se, they're making Pearl Jam songs. Like Deftones put out an album that does not sound like other Deftones albums. I mean, it has that spirit of Deftones, like you recognize it as Deftones, but like if we're comparing this, to Diamond Eyes or what was the one just before Ohms? I forget now off the top of my head what that one was called.
I don't remember either.
But wow. But it was like those albums had a different sound to them and a different feel. And like, once again, Deftones just continue to surprise and they sound fresh as ever. Like you wouldn't believe that this is a band
you couldn't remember it because it's called Koi no Yokan.
Okay.
Gore.
Yes.
And Gore.
Oh yeah. And Gore too. Yeah. So I think that like they still sound like a band that's in their 20s. Like Chino sounds as good today as he did back then,
And you don't get that. You don't get that from angry bands. Like
you just don't. They
usually run out of things to scream about.
Yeah, exactly. And and Steph's guitar playing is just getting better and better. I mean, he is such an underrated guitar player. I think maybe we talked about this before, but I don't assume that everybody's listened to all of our podcasts, but he's definitely a very underrated guitar player. You won't see him on a lot of lists of the top 50 guitar players of all time or whatever. And I don't know if he should be, but I'm just saying, like, I think he's very up there in terms of an inventive style and a style that's definitely all his own. And
No,
it's
and you're talking about a guitarist who's 50. You know, the rest of the band is like going on their 50s. They're
yeah,
not
it's
supposed to be
crazy.
putting out albums like this at the stage that they are in their career. Everything that they do from this point forward is like complete and utter bonus. And
Yeah,
I hate to
and
talk about them like that, but
but no, I felt like around the time of Koi no Yokin and Diamond Eyes, like it felt like, all right, this is kind of where Deftones are settling. Like, it's like, all right, this is kind of where that, that curve is settling, and okay, so this is what we're going to get out of Deftones, and it was still good. Those are good albums. I'll listen to them every now and then. It's cool. Like I like them, but I think then when they put out Gore, like Gore did like these like really super atmospheric things that it was like, okay, like maybe they do still have something left. And then they put out Ohms, which is like bringing in elements of shoegaze, I would say, like a little bit, and like I don't know if you remember, but somebody who had heard the Deftones album before it came out had said that this was what the Hum album was supposed to be. And like, I kind of feel like that was accurate. Like you listen to the Deftones out like Ohms and you're like, okay, this is what I thought that Hum album was going to be like, sort of that wall of guitar in your face, And so they went in this like once again, just a different direction that I wasn't totally expecting. And I mean, that album just blew me away.
yeah, no, absolutely. So before we go to the number one, because I don't want to be accused of burying the lead, let's talk about Mansions,
Yeah.
because of all the albums that came out this year, that was one that really surprised me because it's not a big time band. It's not, I mean, they've got a healthy following. It's a good band, but for them, it's another one where for them to put out this material at this point in their career just seemed so crazy, just absolutely insane. How good and how much of a step forward and how interesting it was compared to, kind of the more, I'm going to cut my wrists and I'm going to bleed all over the place, emo kind of music
Yeah.
that got their career started. This is like a really, has a pop sensibility, and almost like a Radiohead turn.
Yeah, so that was exactly what I was going to say. That was the exact comparison I was going to make. Like to me, this is like a Radiohead type leap, and I mean, I think some of these songs sound like they could almost be Radiohead songs, like middle era Radiohead songs, and uh, I think you turned me on to this band, or
I think so too.
initially, and I've always liked them, but like this album, like I want to say, like, was that April when this came out? 'Cause I feel like it was shortly after Pearl Jam, even. So it was almost like once it was like, okay, I was really enjoying the Pearl Jam album, but I needed like the next thing. Like I feel like in my head, if I remember correctly, that Mansions was kind of that next album that I really latched onto, and I listened to the Big Bad. I listened to this album a lot. Um, especially early summer, late spring, that time frame.
Yeah, it was actually June. Yeah, it was late June.
Okay,
So
it was
it was
June. Okay,
firmly in the summer for us. But
yeah.
they'd released a couple of singles early, so
Okay,
that's why it
yeah,
feels like April or
yep,
May.
yeah,
Um, and then so now, without bearing the lead any longer, we've got to talk about the number one and the fact that both of us, I shared it with you,
yep.
and it was what, 35 days ago, 25 days ago.
Was it even that? Like time flies, I guess. But
So Spanish love songs.
so I think you want to talk about how you found them.
Yeah.
I,
So
I think that's kind of an interesting story because
I,
neither of us had. At least I was not familiar with these guys at all before you shared it with me. I don't know if were at all familiar with them, but
yeah, no, I'd heard of them, and because they'd toured with some other bands that I'd heard of and kind of that emo revival. Um, and so Spanish love songs was a recommended song on the, hey, we saw your end of year stuff on Spotify. You'll probably like this band. And I heard the first song and I got the same like chills that I got the first time I heard The Hotel Year, probably the first time I heard Mansions, and I put that album on, and it was song after song after song after song. I've got the chills again just telling you about it.
Yep.
And all of a sudden it's like, here we're 10 months, 11 months in, 11 and a half months into 2020. And I think I have a new number one album for the entire year that's probably going to carry me all the way into 2021.
Yeah. I think that's what's awesome about this album is that not only is it both of our favorite album of 2020, but because it came out so late, we're going to be listening to this plenty in 2021
It came out in February. We just discovered it late.
Yeah, that's what I should have said. We found it late in the year.
Yeah.
I think you certainly hit the nail on the head there with the Hotel Year, Mansions comparison. I even felt like there was a little bit of like the first time I heard Senses Fail. I don't know if you ever listened to Senses Fail at all, like throwing it back a decade. But like when I first heard Senses Fail, like the lady in the blue dress, like that kind of stuff. And it was like, it's something about that kind of music that can just hook you and just grab onto you and not let go. And I was about 3 days in of listening to it, and I probably listened to it 10 times in those 3 days. And I was like, I think this is going to be my favorite album of the year. Like I kept pushing back doing my list. Like we had talked about doing the list before we had even heard of Spanish love songs. We had started the framework of building our lists. And, I knew we wanted to get it finished, but I just kept kind of like pushing it back because I kept wanting to wait and see. I wanted to make sure, like, is this album going to hold up? And then, so a week goes by and yep, still holds up. 2 weeks go by. All right, I'm still listening to this all the time, and it's still just as good as the first time I heard it. And so it just got to the point where it was just undeniable. This is the best album I heard this year.
And I was trying to figure out what it was, by the way, and you nailed it perfectly when you and I were talking about it. You said that when you're playing it, the way that they sing, the way that they play music, it makes you feel like everything that they're saying is the most important thing that's ever been committed to record.
Right. You feel that sense of urgency that every note matters, that when you get the sense that when they wrote these lyrics that he poured over these lyrics to get everything just right, to say exactly what he wanted to say. And that's the thing too, like lyrically, like, the album is very emo for sure. But like, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here because I don't want to call like other emo whiny. I mean, some of it certainly can be, but
sure,
this is in no way, shape, or form does it come across whiny. Like it's just very visceral. Like he makes you feel those emotions that he's trying to get across to you, and you just like you feel every inch of it, and that's what makes it so powerful. It's just that relatability that hooks you into it.
Well, and I just knew it's my type of album. And, I listened to it when I was on one of my runs and I compared it to the previous day's time. And it was like 90 seconds or 2 minutes or 3 minutes faster than what I'd done the day before, which is like music can actually do that to your runs. And it's just pretty unbelievable. So,
I would say it's not, but it was not an album I think I was expecting at all in 2020. And it sort of like messes with me on like an opposite spectrum of what the Pearl Jam album does for me. Like it pushes and pulls in those different directions, and it gives me good sort of balance between those different things. But it was just, it's so fun to like be surprised, I guess, by a late year album like this. And I also am trying to think too, like, I don't know is that you and I probably have ever had the same number one. Like our lists have a lot of similarities year after year because we have very similar tastes, but like, I'm not sure that we've ever both had the same number one, unless maybe like a Deaf Heaven album would be like, if we had those at number one on any year. But so that's kind of cool too. Just that I think it's just, again, speaks to the quality of this album, that it didn't just grab a hold of me. It didn't just grab a hold of you. Like, it got both of us at the same time equally and had the same effect on us. And I think that just goes to show that, it's legit.
No, and that's one of my favorite things about us being friends and having so much music in common, is that we have so much crossover, but every single year there'll be something a little bit punky that rises to your number one that is not going to rise to my number one, and maybe something a little bit, whatever, that rises to my number one and misses yours.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of been a fun thing too. It's like, by doing these lists and stuff too, like, I think we both are pretty good at sharing music that we are pretty sure the other one's going to like. Like, I can listen to something and I'll be like, all right, this is pretty good for me, but I think Craig's going to really like this. And, there's certainly been vice versa too. So I think that's part of the fun part of, doing these lists as well. It's not just
and let's talk about that. So I want to talk about Nothing, but we're not going to be able to talk about all these. And we have a special guest joining us in about 5 minutes, 5, 6, 7 minutes, something like that. You sent me Envy, and that's one that just keeps creeping back. And it's like, for those who are watching and listening, we're not telling you the best things that hit the entire world this year. We're telling you the stuff that Andrew and I liked. Envy is like this crazy, screamy, black metal, melodic, weird thing. But that just goes to show, kind of what we're into. But you were 100% right. You knew that I was going to love it.
Yeah. And that was one that, like, I really listened to the hell out of this album for a good solid month or two. And then I kind of went away from it for a while. And then, late fall, I kind of started going back to it and listening to it again. And I love that album. It's just, again, that sort of black metal, like, that just wall that hits you in the face with it. But yet there's something like almost pretty and melodic about, some of the layering that they do with the guitars underneath that wall. And that's an outstanding album for sure.
All right. So a couple surprise ones for me. First of all, Dikembe Muck, that album came out of nowhere for me. It was, it's a band that I wasn't really all that into in the other parts of their career, although I liked it. And then this one comes out and it just completely blew me away. Just absolutely loved it. And then one that's not from this year, but like, other than Pearl Jam, really kind of nursed me through the beginning of the pandemic, was Crux by Moontooth. And it's almost like an album out of this time period.
Yeah.
If it had come out in the early 2000s, when Korn and like a lot of that pop metal was dominating the airwaves, but it's not cheesy like some of that stuff has proven to be, where it's dated and it didn't hold up. This is like just the ultimate in progressive modern rock with quality, without the cheesy vocals, without the cheesy lyrics.
Yeah.
And it just rocks. It just absolutely rocks.
Yep, for sure. I think in a similar vein to that, like, and certainly I love that Dikembe album too. I think you had a little bit higher than I did on my list, but like, in a similar way you were saying, like, for me, my sort of comparison to that would be Touche Amore, where that's a band that, I've listened to their previous albums and I've liked them, but they've never been a band that I would like talk to people about and be like, man, I really love Touche Amore. But something about Lament, their album they put out this year, it was really good. Yeah, and I just kept going back to it. Like, I'd just be like, man, I don't know what I feel like listening, and then I'd start scrolling through my playlists, and I would see it, and I'd be like, yeah, all right, I'm gonna listen to that again. And so that one really grabbed me. Another thing that's kind of interesting is last year was like a really hip hop heavy year for me. Not when I say last year, I mean 2019. I know, like, I had like the Brockhampton album was in my top 5. I had Danny Brown had put out an album. Trying to think who else. There were several hip hop albums in my top 20, And this year, like, I didn't listen to hardly any. There was very few new hip hop albums that really grabbed me, but I did. The one that I do have in my top 10 is Run the Jewels. And that's another album that it's hard to separate from the time and place of when that came out. You know, that came out right after the George Floyd stuff started happening. And
it was a
like,
huge surprise. It came out of nowhere.
Yep. And it was just like, I think did they possibly even put that out for free? Did they give that out for free or not? It doesn't matter. But like, it was just like, they just dropped it with like, hey, like, you know, this is what, you know, is on our hearts, like, have at it, you know?
And for me, before you go on, I had not caught on to Run the Jewels. So this was my first experience, and I listened to it.
Okay.
And so
Nice.
for me, it was like a gateway. And now all of a sudden I had all these other albums to listen to as well. It was awesome.
Which is always fun too. That's always fun when
Yeah.
you discover something. You're like, oh, awesome. They have 3 other albums I get to listen to. So that album like was again in this like really interesting time and place in our society. And it was like this huge statement album, but it was really good musically too. Like and lyrically, you know, just it's with Run the Jewels, like they're pretty consistent. You're going to get a good quality album from them. But I think this one just spoke so much more to where we were in that place and time. And I think that really carried that album for me this year. But other than that, like, you know, I like the Kid Cudi album more than most people did. Most people didn't like it very much, but I kind of liked it actually. I'm trying to even think if there was any other hip hop albums that like really grabbed me this year. And this was such a rock heavy year. Like all these rock bands put out just amazing albums this year. I mean, talked about
this year also turned me into a Taylor Swift fan.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
No. And it almost makes me sad because I saw a lot of her country fans and her kind of pop fans feeling like let down or defied by the fact that she produced 2 albums with the dude from The National and wrote some songs with the dude from Bon Iver and, you know, Justin Vernon. And, but for me, like, indie rock Taylor Swift is the best Taylor Swift I've ever listened to.
So I've never been like a crazy big Taylor Swift fan. I
went to see her at the Q with my wife because my wife wanted to see her. And
oh, nice.
You know,
was that like recently or like, I mean, not in 2020, obviously.
Yeah. 3 or 4 albums ago. Yeah.
Okay.
It was probably like 3 or 4 years ago.
You know, certainly like I could recognize her talent, you know, when the country stuff was out, but that really didn't do a whole lot for me. And then 1989, I thought that was such an interesting album, like her like sharp turn direct headfirst into pop. And then and so I listened to all of her albums. Like I'll give them a couple listens. I really liked 1989. I thought that one was really, really good. I would say this year Folklore was the first one, right?
Yep. And then Evermore was the second
so
one.
Folklore I really liked. Folklore was really good.
I actually think Evermore was better, but
and see, I
liked them both.
I struggled with Evermore for some reason, and I can't put my finger on why. And again, it might go back to that sort of time and place thing. I was really busy when Evermore dropped, and I think I just never really spent the time to sit down and give it a fair listen. But I just, for whatever reason, that one I didn't listen to as much. But Folklore I really liked.
Yeah. Well, and so anyway, that's kind of our year in music. I know it's a brief overview. We'll publish the list at some point. And again, like this is just our corner of the world. I didn't even talk about The Beautiful Mistake. There were so many bands. So The Beautiful Mistake hasn't been a band. They're like a Christian hardcore emo band from 20 years ago that broke up, and then they like got back together for this EP.
Oh, wow.
So that. And then Hum is another band that released an album for the first time in probably 20 years. You know, we had
that was pretty surprising.
A lot of those really surprising type of things happened in 2020 that, you know, we probably should spend some time talking about. But
I also think we also like one album I know that you and I both really love that I don't think we really talked about was that Nothing album,
Oh
The Great
yeah.
Dismal. I just
So here's the
when
thing. I love it. Um, I don't know if I love the whole thing because the first song is so good. I just kind of listen to the first song on repeat over and over and over again.
there's certainly like the first song, the fourth song is really up there for me too.
Yeah.
This is definitely a bit of a peaks and valleys album, but well, I don't even want to call them valleys, peaks and plateaus
Yeah.
maybe. Um,
But that opening song is an all timer.
but again, you talk about shoegaze, like that is like perfect shoegaze. Like that's what you want. That's that heavy feeling that you want, that you just can, you're instantly transported into a certain mindset when you listen to those kind of albums. And that was really powerful. And they have an interesting backstory, which we won't get into, but they're a really interesting band, and I've loved all of their albums, but this one was just outstanding. It's probably
Yeah.
my favorite of their albums.
All right. Well, I'm going to do a little bit of a transition here. I'm going to stop screen sharing this. I'm going to remove that. So we've got a guest by the name of Jamin Dunn. He's somebody who's read Waiting for Next Year for a long time. I've known him through the website for a long time. And then he put out an album here that I heard it a few months, 6 months ago, however long ago he sent me the link, and now it's out. And we wouldn't just have any, I listened to it and it's really good. So that's why he's coming on the show. So I'm going to drop us out. We're going to play a little bit of, the song Hindsight. And then, after a couple minutes, we will be back. Andrew and I will be back with Jamin. So, bear with me 1 second while I do this transition here. Producing on the fly. All right. All right, we are back. Welcome to the show, Jamin. How's it going?
It's going great. Awesome to be here. It's funny the way the journey has gone, Craig. I started listening to Waiting for Next Year probably in like 2014 when I was living in Arizona, and now you're my insurance agent, and I'm on your podcast, man.
Hey, he's
amazing.
He's my insurance agent too. So that's the secret. If you want to get on the podcast, you better talk to Craig about
Andrew,
my insurance.
It's really
too, Andrew.
I just had
Jamie.
I just had OK Pants on the podcast too. He's also a client.
Is he really?
See?
But honestly, you know what, Jamin? If your album sucked, you wouldn't be on the podcast.
Oh, I appreciate that.
No, it's I was talking to you about some of the music. I listened to the whole thing. I listened to parts of it a couple months ago. I listened to the whole thing last week, and it's kind of a throwback. It's kind of that, not big band and like the swing jazz kind of but it's kind of that big band, like the E Street Band and that kind of style. Is that what you always wanted to put together?
I don't know that it's what I always wanted to put together, but I don't know, Andrew, I don't know how old you are, but I turned 40 this last year, and
41.
Yeah. Okay. And I think you get to a point in your, as a songwriter anyways, where you stop and go, okay, wait, this is the kind of music that I like. And so I'm going to write those kinds of songs. I'm going to produce and track that type of music. And I think it's a little bit unique. You had said that, Craig, there's not a lot of bands and artists right now that are, writing 6-minute songs with a saxophone solo, and I just love that kind of music. I always, like, Tom Petty is a hero of mine. And I've always loved guys like Bruce Springsteen. Probably my favorite band of the last 5 years is a band called the War on Drugs out of Philadelphia. And when I heard their first record, I was like, oh, there's somebody else out there like me. And it just kind of was a kind of a motivation to just kind of run headlong into that format and that medium, which is a little bit different than what you're hearing now.
Well, and it's kind of an outlier just in this time period for a lot of artists, because there's so many people who are throwing stuff together on GarageBand in their house, and you can create a super polished album on a shoestring in ways that you couldn't when you and I were in our teenage years,
right?
Where
even 5 years ago.
Yeah, you're flipping over a tape on a 4-track to make it an 8-track or whatever, or no, you're flipping over a tape to make a 2-track a 4-track. Back in the days. But even still, even with all that power in our bedrooms, in our homes, in our basements, how did you put this together? Because you got so many players and so many singers and so many musicians on this.
So. Some of it, one of the things about this project that I probably in 2016, I said to my wife, I said, I just want to make a project that really reflects where I've come as a songwriter, but also just kind of as a man. My wife and I have been married for 18 years. I've got 5 daughters, and we've lived in 4 major cities since we got married. We lived in Nashville for 10 years. We lived in Phoenix, Columbus, and now we're up here in the Cleveland area. And on that journey, I've met and have been able to maintain some great friends who are also musicians. And so I was in a band back in.
So you acquired an all-star cast over all your moves.
Yeah, I kind of did. I'm the friend that keeps up with you, even if I don't believe in out of sight, out of mind. And so
whether they want you to or not.
That's exactly right. and so I made some friends when I was in Nashville. Was there for a long time. And
are there any musicians in Nashville? Is that
a few? I was there. It's a great city to make contacts, and it's a terrible city to try to get discovered. It's just,
well, and everywhere you turn, there's somebody who makes you feel embarrassed to own your instrument.
Yeah. I mean, like we had a good band back in 2012, 2013. We got to be on TV a little bit, on the radio a little bit, but it's like, you're a good, so what? There's like 1,000 good bands in Nashville.
And for every band, there's 3 session people who can just play you under the table.
At least 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think even just like the bar scene there, like when you go and you just walk down the street, you go into one bar and you listen to a band for a while and you're like, all right, this is really good, you know, but then you go to the next one and it's like, oh wait, these guys are really good too.
Yeah.
And then it's like, after a while, you're like, I can't even remember what that first band sounded like anymore, because I've just heard good band after good band. Like it's just, you can't go anywhere in Nashville without running into a good band, good guitar player, a good singer.
It's true. And it's also, what's interesting about Nashville is it's a very closed society when it comes to who's who with regard to musicianship and songwriting and that kind of thing. And it was a very difficult circle to crack. I wouldn't even say that I cracked it, but it was also kind of a learning experience as an artist and as a producer and a writer. It's like, I didn't want to treat people that way. I wanted to really include and continue to keep people involved in whatever it was that I was doing, because, you know, you add to yourself, you grow, and there are people that help you do that. And then you move on. And it seemed to me just not cool to leave those people behind. And so to answer your question, Craig, yeah, there's like 16 or 18 people that contributed to this project in one way or another. And it was all done on Logic, which is a DAW that you can get for Mac, and Dropbox. So the drummer that was the drummer in our band, Weatherby, his name's Clay Wood. He's got a kind of a home drum studio in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And so I would send to him all of my work tapes on these songs, and he would load those into his DAW and lay down all the drums. And then I engineered most of it here in Elyria, Ohio, in my house. And then I had another friend in Nashville named Reed Pittman that played all the key stuff. And then it was just a little bit of this and a little bit that. Friends in Phoenix, people that you heard a woman named Lydia Lee sing just there, who I met a year ago.
You're damn right I did.
Yeah, she's good.
She's a killer.
She's amazing. And I moved in next door to the guy who ended up being elected mayor of Elyria, and he invited me to his inauguration, and she sang at the inauguration. And I went to the banquet afterwards and said, "Hey, I'm Jamin. I'm making this record. I got to have you sing on it." And so it's just kind of this really fun collaboration of a journey through America and through time, and just the different things that I've experienced, and failures and fears, and loving my wife and loving my kids and all those kinds of things that has kind of created this album. Well,
it sounds great. Good luck following it up, man. Yeah. Like, I know you're not worried about that. It's like you create this great thing, and I've been there where I've put out an album, and it's like, all you care about in that moment is doing the best you possibly can with that material. And if that's the last thing you ever do, you want it to kind of stand on its own. At least that's the way I felt. I mean, is that the way you felt when you were at what point was it done? And does that approximate some of the feelings you were having?
Yeah, I think so. I wrote probably somewhere between 30 and 40 songs between 2016 and when I really started to work on the project in earnest, and tracked 15 of those, and that whittled its way down to the 12 that are on the record. One of the things that's unique about this is that I actually am pressing a vinyl as well, with Gotta Groove Records right downtown in Cleveland on the east side of the city, and learning how to write for vinyl and just the way that medium needs to be treated. With even like, I learned you got to have your upbeat songs at the front because they're not going to sound as good towards the end of that side of the record. There's a whole science to it, and having to pare things down and be okay with saying goodbye to a couple of songs because it's not gonna work. And so on the vinyl, it went 8 tracks, and then when you buy it, you get 4 additional tracks on the digital that are kind of like bonus tracks. Because I had so much music recorded. Kyle Mann is a good friend of mine who works at Speakeasy Sound in Burbank, and is working on huge Grammy projects. He mastered it for me, and he called me and goes, "This is really good, but this is really long. Like, you can't, this isn't going to work. You can't release."
You're doing it wrong. It should have been four or 5 EPs based on 2020.
But well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I wanted
2021.
I wanted to really release something conceptual. And if you listen to the songs,
I was joking, by the way. I'm old as dirt. I love a full album.
Yeah.
And so does Andrew.
Yeah. And that's the fun thing, with vinyl, like, you have to sit down, you have to listen to it. You can't skip ahead. You can't, just listen to one song over and over again. You listen to the whole thing. You pour yourself a cocktail and you turn on the record. And so I just wanted to do that. I've always, I've idolized guys like Tom Petty and Paul Simon. I was listening to what was I listening to the other day? James Taylor, who they made albums and it worked from start to finish. And somewhere along the way, our attention spans got too short for that kind of art. And I think it's a shame. I don't think we have to accept that. I think that's something that we should continue to strive for and really present something real and cohesive and complete. And that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah. And I don't think it's completely gone. One of the things that makes me think that it's not is, even today, as much as kids are flocking to modern artists, they're still listening to AC/DC. They're still going back to Pink Floyd. They're going back to Led Zeppelin, Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen. And those guys, in this case, those guys all created full albums. And yeah. I do think that, it might not work in drum and bass. It might not work in pop. It might not work in rap, in certain kinds of rap. But I do think there'll always be a home for albums in rock.
Yeah, you talked about Taylor Swift, like 1989. That's an album. That whole thing is amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what do your girls think? 5 girls. Do they think Dad's crotchety and a grizzled old rock guy? Or do they like it?
They like it. My daughter Naya actually is.
Or they say they do.
My daughter's 16. My oldest is 16, and she actually sang on 2 of the tracks.
Oh, that's awesome.
She has really had an affinity for what Dad does. All of my girls sing and have, I think, varying degrees of interest in music. I think that Dad can be intimidating, unfortunately, a little bit there, because music is Dad's thing. And so I want to be encouraging to them to pursue those things and to practice and to find out what they like, without them feeling like, well, I'm never going to be as good as Dad. It's just a weird line to walk. Like, I don't want to necessarily give my kids guitar lessons because I don't want to be that disciplinarian in that aspect when I have to be it in so many other ways. But no, my kids love the music. My daughter Piper is 11, and I'll catch her singing the songs as she walks down the hallway or in the shower. You'll hear her singing. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
All right, enough about you. What were your favorite things you listened to in 2020?
Wow. Okay.
And stuff that actually came out in 2020, old man.
2020. Are you guys familiar with the group Dawes?
Yep.
Dawes came out with a new record just a couple of months ago called "Good Luck with Whatever." I really like they're another group, kind of like War on Drugs. It's a different sound, but they're just writing really good songs, and they're kind of presenting those songs in a very reproducible, 5-piece kind of way. I discovered a guy named Leif Volbeck, from I think he's out of Toronto. He's just fantastic. His record might have come out in 2019, so I might be a year late on that, but
fair enough. Yeah, it did. New Ways came out in 2019.
Yeah, New Ways, and then the one that came out a year before or a couple years before that called Twin Solitude, just fantastic. I've always been a fan of the group The Naked and Famous, and they had a new record that came out this year that I really enjoyed. There's an artist, another Canadian artist, Kathleen Edwards. She came out with a new project this year that I really enjoyed, called Total Freedom. I've loved everything that she's done. She's also collaborated with the guy from Bon Iver as well. And then I started listening to the you talked to me about them, Craig. What are they called? Spanish something.
Yeah, Spanish love songs.
Yeah, I've been listening to Spanish love songs here recently.
And that was Andrew in my top.
Right.
Yeah.
It's cool. It reminded me of another group out of Australia. I sent them to you. I don't know if you checked that out.
I didn't, but I remember the recommendation.
And I'm trying to think of their name now. This is great for podcasts.
No, I mean,
That's
all good.
Gang of Youths. They reminded me a lot of Gang of Youths. They're a group out of Australia. Similar, very introspective, like high highs, low lows in the way that they write. And so that's another one you can check out.
Yeah, for me, like if you just write verse, chorus, verse, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm pretty predictable. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I love the album. It's again, when somebody says, "Hey, check out my album," you're like, "Oh, I don't know. Let's see how this goes." But no, it's legit. It's legit. The production value's there. The songwriting's there. It's a throwback. It's nice to hear. It's nice to hear some guitar solos and some horns and some additional vocalists. You're willing to share the spotlight. It sounds like a big band, like on the E Street Band level. It's on Spotify. It's on Bandcamp. Where can people get that the pressing of the,
so if you want to get the vinyl should be done. Boy, that was one thing that was really interesting because of 2020, and I think everybody decided to make a record this year because
they couldn't tour.
Yeah. And not only that, but vinyl has just come back with such a vengeance here recently. And so the masters for this record were done in August, and I had already decided I definitely wanted to use Got a Groove, wanted to stay local here in Cleveland. And so I talked to Matt Early, who runs the show over there, and he goes, well, it's going to be December before we could start to press that. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And so I looked around.
It's a good thing you didn't do a Christmas record.
I know. And I looked around, and like every, reputable vinyl shop in the country was 3 months, backed up as to when they were going to be able to get something pressed. And so you can get the vinyl on Bandcamp, or if you just go to my website, which is just jamindunn.com, there's a link to Bandcamp. Otherwise, it's jamindunn.bandcamp.com. And
which
you
is
can
up on the screen.
Yeah, there it is. And when you get the vinyl, you'll also get like a little coupon that allows you to download the full 12-song project. And I will ship it to you, or I will bring it to your door, whatever you prefer. So.
Well, awesome, man. Thanks for talking to us about the project. It was
for
good
sure
to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate being here, and I'll be. I caught a little bit of OK Pants segment, and I'll be watching on Sunday, just enjoying the ride, man. we made the playoffs. That's enough for me.
It's all gravy, right?
That's right.
All right, we'll see you, Jamin.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Andrew. So that was our music. We didn't really talk sports this time, but that's fine. you and I will get back together, hopefully after the Browns game, after the Buckeyes game, and also, we'll catch up on some Cavs stuff, because this Cavs